Santiago Canyon College is an innovative learning community in Orange, California, with more than 260 certificate and degree programs. Santiago Canyon College is a proud sponsor of community programming and OC World.
OC World is made possible by the generous contributions of Marisla Foundation, Keith and Judy Swain Family Foundation, Wells Fargo Bank, the University of California, Irvine, Orange County Community Foundation, Farmers and Merchants Bank, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to OC World. I'm your guest host, Gaddi Vasquez. Today we dive into a new poll conducted by the School of Social Ecology here at the University of California, Irvine, that suggests the County of Orange has actually turned purple, where the balance of power in the next Congress could well hinge on how residents vote here in Orange County. Orange County, though, with its 3.2 million residents, has seen a dramatic shift in its population over the last few decades, with Hispanics and Latinos now accounting for roughly 34% of the county's residents, and Asian Americans accounting for roughly 22%. To help us unpack what these changes mean for the upcoming elections and the broader implications for American democracy, we have two distinguished guests. John Gould, the Dean for the School of Social Ecology at the University of California, Irvine, who can provide insights into the poll's findings and their significance, and Mike Madrid, political consultant and author of The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy, who will share his expertise on how the growing Latino population is reshaping the political landscape. To gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for bringing the show here to UC Irvine.
It's great to be on campus. So Dean Gould, let's talk a little bit about the context of the poll. Why a poll from the University of California at Irvine, and why does that matter? Why is it important and relevant to the current year that we are in?
Well, Orange County is one of the most important counties in the country, and we are the research university for the county. It's important for us as a county to understand what's going on here, what trends are happening, what are we seeing as changes, and particularly with 4 congressional races that are competitive this time around that may very well shape what the next Congress looks like. It's important for us to have a poll to be able to show people what's happening and also why.
And in reviewing the poll, there's many findings and suggestions, conclusions that one can arrive at once you have a chance to read the entirety of the report. But what are the 2 or 3 top things that stood out for you in the findings of that poll?
So I'd say there are 3 things. Number one, as you said in the opening, Orange County is truly purple these days. Now, I think we are all old enough to remember when this was a rock red county. This was the county where Ronald Reagan said old Republicans went to live before they died. Today, it is a third, Democrat, Republican, Independent. That is a big shift. So that's the first thing the poll shows. The other thing the poll shows is a significant difference of about 8% in whether people support Donald Trump or Joe Biden, depending on whether they are registered to vote or not. So across the county as a whole, Trump currently, when we did the poll, had a 1% lead. If you look at people who are registered to vote and likely to vote, Biden has an 8-point lead. That is absolutely significant. The third thing is that in the past, we would have expected to see larger differences based on race or ethnicity, income level. One of the biggest distinctions this time around is college education. People who have college educations, whether they are white or whether they are non-white, are going for Biden by a large margin. People without college educations are either split or slightly going for Trump. That kind of a difference is significant.
And Mike, based on that, your reaction, given that you have followed Latino politics and politics in general, but any reaction to what the Dean has just outlined?
That third finding, I think, is the most fascinating, because in a place like Orange County, we have a larger share of voters of color who are also college graduates. And so there's this changing conceptualization of why minority voters are voting the way that they are. The standard ideology is that Latinos, Mexican Americans specifically, are going to vote overwhelmingly Democratic. That's been shifting right nationally, but it gets a little bit more complicated when they rise with their education levels. College-educated Latinos are starting to split along a gender gap and a gender line, with Latinas who go to college at a much faster rate than our men are overwhelmingly voting for Democrats. There's a little bit of a lag with men, but overall what we're seeing is not a pure race or ethnic voter and not a pure economic class voter, but a more culturally educated voter. And those issues are what is defining the political behavior in those voter attitudes, and for the moment, that overwhelmingly benefits the Democratic Party.
Do you see any trends among young Latinos or Latinas that their engagement in politics or voting is changing significantly? Are we seeing a greater level of participation or maybe more interest in things that are going on? Because it seems that as Latinos advance economically, socially, and otherwise, that maybe it changes the political engagement level. That's my theory.
No, yeah, and a theory that we've had conversations about over the years. Yes, a couple of interesting statistics. 38% of all the Latino voters nationally will have voted for the first time in 2016 or more recently. That's almost 40% of the electorate, the fastest growing part of the electorate, that's only going to be voting for their first, second, maybe third time for President of the United States. This is an incredibly young vote. And so a lot of the questions, the answers to your questions, we simply don't know. We're looking at other data points to try to figure it out. What most polling is telling us is Latinos have a lower voter participation rate, oftentimes because we're a younger, less wealthy, less college-educated community. All of those are three indicators of a lack of civic participation, including voting behavior. But again, Orange County is a little bit different. There is much more upward mobility economically. There is a Latino middle class, and there are more Latino college-educated voters. And as a result, we're seeing higher engagement, higher participation, and we're just now beginning to understand what the political behavior of those new voters are, because in fact, they are the fastest growing segment of this exploding Latino population.
What does the poll tell you about the Asian voter? What trends do we see developing? Are they similar? Do they parallel the Latino trajectory, or is that different?
They're a little bit different. So for starters, they have the most positive view of life here in Orange County. So everyone across the board is saying the nation is going in the wrong direction. 2/3 of Orange County voters say that the nation's off the rails. When we ask people about Orange County, do you think it's going the right direction or wrong direction? The plurality believes it's going in the right direction. Asian voters feel it most of all. So they're being motivated more by positive things. The Asian voter also, or Asian voters, I should say, in the county, more likely to be independent than Republican or Democrat. White voters here in Orange County, more likely the plurality of them are Republican. The plurality of Latino voters is Democratic. The plurality of Asian voters is independent. So they're really a group that's very much up for grabs.
Can I add one other quick thing? We're undertaking a project that we call Red County, Blue County, Orange County, because of all these dynamics coming together in one place. One thing that we have found out that is really unique and fascinating is not just that Latinos, second and third generation, are starting to either disaffiliate from either major party or move towards the Republican Party, away from the traditional Democratic stereotype, but their Vietnamese counterparts are doing the exact opposite. Vietnamese who came here in response to fleeing communism immediately became overwhelmingly Republican. We're seeing Vietnamese second and third generation voters move away from both parties or reject the Republican Party and start becoming Democrats in the exact opposite of what Latinos are doing, literally in cities right next to each other. And it gives us the perfect petri dish to understand changing conceptions of racial identity and how typical assimilative patterns are affecting different communities, literally in the same space. Really fascinating work.
Any thoughts on what the underpinning is causing that shift in terms of generational from what you just described, the recent immigrant? Because, there's also, from time to time, I have conversations with people who have immigrated from countries where voting didn't matter, where voting was inept, it was scandalous, the outcomes were fixed, and so on and so forth. And on arrival here, presume the same thing here, that their lack of confidence in an electoral process from their country of origin was transferable to California, the United States of America. Any theories on why that shift from the first generation to the next generation, ensuing generations?
We actually see higher voter participation rates with the recently naturalized, and then they drop in the second and sometimes third generation. So the theory that maybe they don't vote because of corruption or it doesn't matter in the mother country doesn't really doesn't hold too well with that kind of statistic. Unless it skips a generation, which kind of doesn't make sense. The more likely answer for declining voter participation and lack of civic engagement is economic displacement, is where we find lower income levels and lower education levels regardless of race or ethnicity. We find it with African American voters in the Deep South, white voters in Appalachia, Latino voters, in certain communities in Los Angeles or California. All voter participation is low. So that tells us that there's probably a strong economic correlator that is keeping people not fully engaged in the electoral process, or at least feeling they have a stake in society where their vote actually matters.
And in terms of, did your poll in any way, form, or fashion reveal any kind of gap or distance between the voter and sources of information? We have often commented that here we are in Orange County. You have one of the largest media markets in the world, just 30 miles from here, where the University of California, Irvine. To the south, you have San Diego County, which has affiliates from NBC, CBS, ABC. Even the Coachella Valley has ABC, NBC, CBS, but Orange County has none of those. And so voters have to rely on what to inform themselves?
Interestingly, a lot of them said that they actually get their news from local television. So that raises that interesting question of what counts as local here. The thing that there's kind of a generational shift is where younger voters are getting more and more of their news online. Some of them were even saying that they get their news from TikTok. So there really is, there's a focus both on local media here, but then online among the younger folks. So that's another shift that we're seeing.
But what does the older voter do in that context when you're adverse or you're not in tune with the latest sources of information through social media or otherwise?
So they'll watch local television, they'll read the local papers, the Orange County Register or the LA Times. They will not be online as much. That's not the thing that really worried me as much in the poll. The thing that really worried me, and I think should worry all of us regardless of political opinion, is just what a large percentage of Orange County voters doubted the legitimacy of the last election process. Now, this was skewed. Democrats typically trusted that Biden was legitimately elected, but large majorities of Republicans did not, and a good chunk of independents also did not trust whether he had been elected legitimately. This has a number of effects. Number one, people who don't trust in the system are less likely to show up and vote at all. Number two, there's the question of whether people will accept any sort of result that they don't think goes their favor this next time around. That really worries me. And if we're talking about kind of the state of information, the state of trust, the state of democracy, that really worries me.
But in effect, though, and this is a subject that I talk a lot about, in effect, though, we're basically at the mercy of an assignment editor in Los Angeles who decides what coverage Orange County is going to get on any given night. And politics doesn't seem to be something that is frequently talked about in the context of Orange County by way of Los Angeles media. And I get it, but nevertheless, I think it's still a continuing concern that people are not acquiring knowledge or information in a way that has been traditionally the case, which is television, radio, and beyond. So having said all of that, now we shift a little bit and talk about key congressional races. Some people say, well, Orange County is not relevant anymore. California is not relevant anymore. But Mike, I think that's about to shift here between now and November, right?
There's no question it's shifted. I think Orange County will probably, in likelihood, determine the balance of power in the House of Representatives. California certainly will, generally. Most specifically, I think, three congressional districts, in particular here in Orange County, I think are going to play there'll be a disproportionate impact that Orange County voters have in who controls Congress because of the dynamics that we're talking about, but because of this narrow majority that either party is likely to have. And so the outcomes of the congressional races here in Orange County will determine who's going to be in control.
And in that regard, then going forward, I think we can probably expect a barrage of not only media and print media and national attention, but also the enormous investment of political dollars in campaigns in those congressional districts. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to buckle up your seatbelts and get ready for a lot of advertising that you may or may not want, because you're going to get more than you need, get more than your fair share than most Americans get. But if there's any silver lining to that, Gaddi, I would say just be mindful that your votes are literally that important. That's why the investment is being made, is because it truly is going to have an impact. I will say, with the three seats that are most in contention, they are really representative of the dynamic that we're talking about, with very diverse, racially and ethnically diverse audiences. And what that does is it makes both parties challenge some of their basic assumptions about the way they're approaching these voters, because in fact, they also have higher levels of educational attainment than in other areas of the state where we see. And so when you have a multiracial, upwardly mobile, middle-class, college-educated vote base, we're talking about what the future of the country is ultimately going to look like, where Orange County is already at. And there's really only 3 or 4 other regions of the country that meet that same criteria. And those, perhaps not surprisingly, those same regions also are seeing the same struggle and balance of power and fights in the House of Representatives with their congressional districts. What makes this unique is the regional branding that it has. Orange County is one of the few counties in California where you're from Orange County. You may not be from a specific city, but you're from this place. And this place has all of these tectonic shifts politically happening at precisely the same moment.
And sort of in that vein, but we talked a little bit about the third, and the third. What do the political parties need to be doing to get the attention of the voter, at least the interest of the voter, to be curious about candidacies and profiles of candidates and so forth? Is there anything in the polling that would give you a sense of interpreting what that data says about what the parties may need to do in order to be able to give the voter the benefit of knowledge, which is, in my view, in a democracy, is critically important?
So from what we're seeing in the polling, it's the economy, the economy, the economy. This is noted by 80% of Orange County voters as the #1 issue. It is across the board. There is almost no difference in priority by race, by income, by education, by gender. That's the #1 issue that's on people's minds. After that, there are differences in terms of foreign affairs, the issue at the border, abortion, how people see the candidates, but it is hands down the economy that is going to get people's attention this time around.
Would you agree with that, Mike? Is that?
Yeah, and one of the curious things about that, I think that's exactly right, is we are seeing something unique that we've never seen, at least in the past few decades, which is by virtually every economic measure and metric, the economy is roaring and doing incredibly well. But there's this huge amount of anxiety amongst a wide swath of voters, upwards of 70% plus, of people of all income levels saying, I don't feel good about where this is heading. And so we've got to look a little bit deeper, both as researchers and political consultants, to understand what is driving that. And what keeps coming back, I think, screaming over and over, is the question of affordability, particularly housing, which is a big problem in California broadly, Orange County perhaps most specifically. And a lot of those issues are going to be handled at the local level. So finding a balance between local partisan Republican lawmakers on city councils and local partisan Democratic lawmakers on that same city council is going to require some sort of bipartisan solutions to ameliorate a problem that is really affecting both parties at this moment in time.
And the interesting take on that too is that housing affordability is a big issue, but so are the rising numbers of people who are unhoused or who are homeless. So it's like you have both ends of the spectrum. You have people who cannot access, may have some capital to invest in a home but cannot afford it, and then you have others who are enduring a life on the streets or in shelters or in other places trying to make a go of it.
Indeed, and that second group, that is a huge social problem. Most of them, though, don't vote. So if we think about the election coming up, it's that other group, the ones who have money to afford, they think they have money to afford housing, they can't because the housing is so expensive here. That issue is going to be a huge driver on where they go and what they do, who they vote for this coming time around.
So in the poll, you referred to Orange County as turning purple. But I've also noted, though, that there still seems to be a very strong sense of support and revere of law enforcement and criminal justice in Orange County. That doesn't seem to have changed. And in fact, we've seen some patterns in some counties and some states where actually DAs have been ousted from office because their policies and practices have been viewed as too liberal. And would it be fair to say that in Orange County, we continue to maintain a pretty strong line when it comes to supporting police, supporting criminal justice system, and justice in this county?
So we didn't ask that question specifically. We did ask about where crime rates on your issues of most importance. Crime was about number 4 or number 5, but significantly below affordable housing, below traffic, below development. I think all you have to do is look at who gets elected here in terms of sheriffs and who gets elected in terms of DAs, I think, to answer that question. But that's a reflection of Orange County being purple. It's not a blue county, it's a purple county. And that means it goes left, it goes right, depending on the time and who's running.
Well, I think the statement you just made is very, very relevant, very important in terms of defining, red versus blue versus purple and what it means. And that is, I think that, and the Latino voter is the same, is the voter that in some respects is proving to be somewhat unpredictable. But I always say to people, Latino means a lot of things. You could be Mexican origin, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Dominicano, and so it's a fascinating time and era for the Latino community, the Latino voter, in terms of its place in the American political landscape. Would you?
Yeah, no question. And obviously the country of origin is a huge part of when we say the Latino vote is not monolithic, that's what we're saying. Right. What we are finding now, and Gaddi, I think you'll appreciate this, is what we have found historically is that generational differences, how far removed we are from the immigrant experience, really defines a lot of our political views. And I bring that up only because the fastest growing segment of the Latino electorate now is the third generation. It's a much more US born population now than it was 2002. Let me give you a real quick statistic. In 2002, in Los Angeles County, our neighbor to the north here, the largest Latino county in America, over 50% of Latino registrants in 2002 were foreign born. By 2022, that number was less than 9%. Just a completely dramatic change in who the Latino voter is. And that's why I wrote the book in part, but it's also a good indicator to look at because the Latino voter we've known for the past 30 years is going to be entirely different than the Latino voter of the next 30 years. And a lot of that groundbreaking research is happening here at UC Irvine with this project. And I think we're going to learn a lot about things like law enforcement, traditional perceptions of law enforcement, housing, and how the housing crisis is going to affect this community over the years, wealth building, upward mobility economically, building a middle class. Are these class issues going to stay as important as they are during the next administration? Is it going to revert to being a more racially, ethnically motivated voter segment, or is this education divide going to redefine a voter bloc in a unique way here in American history?
It's interesting because in some idle time that I had not too long ago, which is not very often, but I had the opportunity to do a little research on my own in terms of elected officials with Hispanic surnames in Orange County, local elected officials. And the number, just on city councils alone, exceeded 30. And it really stood out to me because it has sort of evolved, and they're not necessarily predominantly Latino communities. It's across the entire spectrum of Orange County. In some places where you would have thought a Latino is elected in X city as a city council person. Well, the reality is, I remember growing up in the city of Orange, where in the 60s and 70s, we had a Latino mayor, Jess Perez, who was a trailblazer, breaking through. But I also know that there are Latinas who, like Victoria Jaffe, who is one of the founders of the city of Mission Viejo, first slate of elected officials and whatnot. Can we interpret anything from that in terms of the viability of candidacies of people of color and communities?
So I think it's representative of where we're at right now and how far we've come to be where we're at right now. It's also emblematic of where the country is going. And I really want to underscore a point that Mike has made. What's happening here is what a lot of the country is going to see in the next couple decades. This is a county that is really the future of America now. And if you want to understand what's coming to your community elsewhere, pay attention to what Orange County has been through and what we're going through right now, which is one of the reasons, as Mike said, that we have started this Red County, Blue County, Orange County project here at UC Irvine, because we want to be able to help explain to the rest of the country what's happening here, and that's what they ought to be paying attention to.
Mike, any closing thoughts?
Well, there's a real tendency, I think, to look at America and what's changing racially, demographically, economically, and kind of make an assessment that we're devolving into tribalism. We're voting based off of those that look the most like us, have the same life experience. But what you're seeing here in Orange County, to your point, is something very different. It's a more healthy form of pluralism, which suggests that we are in a county that is almost a third politically. We're getting close to a third racially and ethnically. And we do have a proclivity. Orange County has a proclivity to support people in elected office that don't look like them. And that's very hopeful, because in the final analysis, Gaddi, the difference between tribalism and pluralism is simply perspective. If you're optimistic and hopeful and feel that these are good benefits and value adds, it's pluralism. If it's frightened and isolationist, it devolves into this tribalism. And I think Orange County is showing a new way for American democracy to work.
Well, there's great reason to be optimistic about Orange County's future, because I too share the same thoughts that we have been the consummate laboratory for a lot of these transitions that have happened, and we continue to enjoy a tremendous quality of life. Yes, we need to have more affordable housing, but the fact is low unemployment, high educational attainment, great health care for the county, a diverse and growing county that is being empowered on many, many different levels. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. We could have gone a couple of hours on this topic, but this has been a great conversation, a great discussion. So I want to thank our guests today, John Gould and Mike Madrid, for their insights into Orange County's influence on national politics. Stay tuned, because there's much more to come, and thank you for watching OC World.